You know, I've said the 3-episode rule shouldn't always be a standard for every series you pick up. Forcing yourself to stick it out for 3 episodes can leave one feeling too invested to drop a show you're not enjoying. The sunk cost fallacy is a thing to be aware of, but it's a sad truth that some shows just need more time than a single episode to convey their setup and tone. That's why I say there isn't a hard rule to stick to. You don't owe a series your time for it to become interesting, and each series is its own unique case. But this show, which I took a gander at in my first look this season, definitely was one I'm glad I stuck with despite its initial showing leaving me wanting. Egao no Daika, or The Price of Smiles, had a meandering first episode that I really want to talk about in depth, and how a show's pacing is important to whether it's enjoyable, and also to include whether I think the show is worth sticking it out after a few more episodes have aired, and ultimately, is it a good experience? So let's get this out of the way right off the bat. The first episode of this series gave a poor overall representation of what the series is like. Opening the series on a princess's coming-of-age ceremony with cheering crowds, happy idyllic imagery, and showing not how carefree her life is, but how easy her people have it, sets the stage for the big reveal that not everything is as great as it seems. It's a common trope in storytelling as a medium, so that's not to say spending time showing the character starting at a high point doesn't have its purpose in a narrative sense. Setting up a status quo for subversion is essential to a compelling story as it gives the downstroke and plot progression somewhere to go. I'm certainly not opposed to that. With an ongoing war being kept secret from the princess, Yuki for simplicity's sake, fought far away to keep a larger empire from invading her country, this sets the main conflict for her as a character. So as far in as episode 3, it's about coming to terms that her peaceful existence has been a sham, upheld just to keep her safe and happy by those she's trusted. My biggest issue is the series spends too long setting that norm without hinting at the pressing plot looming on the horizon. It honestly takes until the credits roll to even acknowledge that there actually is a war happening in the first episode. So the whole thing is filled with the coronation, Yuki's new duties, her skipping out for a bit of fun, a meeting, another meeting, and a dick measuring contest / training exercise. Oh, and gearing up a ship for what's presented as a diplomatic mission. Contrast this with the second episode that spends a good amount of time showing the war itself, and that it's not going well for either side, with the kingdom being more technologically advanced but lacking manpower to fuel the battles, and the empire lacking resources to supply its larger army. It even manages to fit in some world building for the planet they're on, hinting at a cause for the war itself. Then episode 3 decides to branch out in an effort to humanize the Empire, so they're not just a big imposing bad guy to threaten the obvious good guys, setting up a series that's looking to tackle some complex moral questions. This is where the series introduces the second main character, a soldier from the Empire. She's a silent type who always carries out her orders with a smile. This easily could have come off as sadistic, but despite her calm and cheerful demeanor when executing something horrible, we see she does take civilian life into account. It comes off that there's more beneath the surface, that she's seen some shit, which is brought up in episode 4, and hints that perhaps she shoulders the bloodshed of the war for the sake of bringing peace, even if that's forcing others under her country's rule. And talk about some deep motivation. With that kind of emotional kick, it really underscores how obnoxious the start of this series was. I honestly feel more could have been done with this show to start off on the right foot with me as a viewer. It's entirely possible to set up the status quo of the series much quicker than it managed, still giving the audience that creeping sense of dread the second episode accomplished. That's not to say the second episode is strong, but it's more engaging than the first. So personally, I would have liked to have seen the battle in the second episode spliced with the first episode's content, giving the audience more to latch onto than a cute smile and fluffy feelings for a whole week with a cliffhanger, hoping that would be enough to pull them back in. The entire dick measuring contest between the two royal guards is superfluous to the narrative as a whole, possibly just get the audience to bond with a character when that same bonding could have easily been accomplished on the battlefield in episode 2. But that's not exactly something that can easily be changed now, is it? So let's talk about what the series is doing right. Well, the latter half of the second episode and episode 3 ultimately leave me with a good taste in my mouth. Perhaps it's the fact that they're losing the war, but it's not a one-sided beatdown where they're getting their asses handed to them. It's a realistic back and forth in the battles with tides changing. Further, episode 3 gets into the opposing side's head, seeing that things aren't exactly rosy for them either. Being a larger country with a high focus on military power, they need greater resources like food to keep that going, spurring their conquest of new lands to support their growing population, and size is a never-ending cycle. More territory means more population, which means more war to capture the land needed to sustain it. This presents us with a nice theme for the series, one the title attempts to capture quite poetically: the cost of war, or the price society is willing to pay for its citizens to be able to smile. This conflict where each side has a stake that makes the audience root for them is the bread and butter of a good military show. Not to mention that the series makes an effort early on establishing that plot armor might not be a thing here. Having the balls to kill off a main character, or at least someone we, the audience, had spent a great deal of time with until that point, takes some cojones, and that's a great way to get the viewers invested in the series further. It may have taken its time, but the show eventually hits its stride enough to pull me along for the ride. So that's where I wrap around and talk about the 3-episode rule once again. If you've dropped this show because the first episode didn't grab you like I nearly did, I'd ask consider giving the second episode a chance and see if that changes your mind. And I don't like urging people to get past an arbitrary point in a story with the promise of it gets good later, because ultimately that begs the question, why isn't it good now? Well, poor screenwriting would be the answer, but that's not a very satisfying one. Ultimately, is The Price of Smiles good? It has its moments that make it enjoyable. 2 episodes isn't the worst time investment to get into a series. If you're looking for a military show with a complex dynamic between enemies, this is probably one of the better ones from winter 2019. As for me, I'm sticking it out because I'm a sucker for narratives where everyone's justified from their own perspective. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and do all the other YouTube stuff because that really helps me out. Thanks for watching.